Lena walked through the busy streets of New York, her footsteps lost among the thousands of others who hurried to their destinations. The city was loud, alive with the sounds of car horns, chatter, and the distant hum of subway trains. Yet for Lena it felt strangely quiet. She felt disconnected from the world around her, like a ghost moving through the crowds. The city, so full of life, felt so empty to her. She had been living in New York for the past few years, but the city hadn't yet become her home. Every morning she followed the same routine: wake up, get dressed, go to work, and repeat. It was like she was on autopilot. Lena had a job at a small bookstore, one of those cozy places with shelves filled with old novels where the smell of paper and ink seemed to stay in the air forever. She loved the quiet there, the peacefulness of the shop, but outside the world felt different. The noise, the rush, the constant need to be somewhere, do something. It all made her feel like she was constantly falling behind. Today, Lena had stepped out for a break. She was tired and needed some time to breathe, but even that seemed like a challenge. Walking down the street, her eyes focused on the ground in front of her, avoiding the busy faces that rushed past. She hated the idea of looking at anyone. People always seemed to judge. She didn't like the way she looked, the way she felt about herself. It was easier to keep her head down and walk on. As she reached the small cafe at the corner of the street, she noticed the large crowd in front. It was lunchtime, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry to get their coffee. Lena stood for a moment, debating whether she should go in. She was tired of the noise and the crowd, but the warmth and comfort of the cafe called to her. She could smell the rich scent of roasted coffee beans, and it made her stomach rumble. She stepped inside, the doorbell ringing above her head as she entered. The warmth of the cafe wrapped around her like a blanket, and for the first time that day she felt a little lighter. She stood in line, waiting her turn, when something unusual happened. Another person stepped into the cafe at the same time. He was tall, dressed in a suit that looked a little too formal for a coffee shop, but he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made him seem perfectly at ease. He reached for the last coffee cup on the shelf just as Lena did. Their hands brushed for a second, and Lena pulled back quickly, startled by the sudden touch. "Oh, I'm sorry," the man said, his voice warm and gentle. "I didn't mean to take the last one." Lena shook her head quickly, offering a small, polite smile. "It's fine. You go ahead." The man seemed to hesitate for a moment, and then he stepped back. "No, really, I insist. I'm just here for a quick coffee. You look like you've had a long day." Lena blinked, a little surprised by the kindness in his words. She wasn't used to people speaking to her like this. Usually people were either too busy or too focused on their own lives to notice her. But this man, this stranger, was looking at her with genuine interest. It made her uncomfortable, but she didn't know why. "I'm fine," she replied quietly. "I just needed a quick break." The man smiled again, his expression softening. "Well, in that case, I'll let you have the last cup." He winked playfully and added, "But next time you owe me one." Lena couldn't help but laugh, the sound catching her off guard. It had been so long since she'd really laughed. The man's smile was warm, and something about it made her feel a little lighter. Maybe it was the fact that he wasn't judging her. Or maybe it was the kindness he showed, but in that moment, Lena felt seen, not invisible. "Next time," she said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The man gave a small nod and turned to leave, but he stopped at the door. "Hey, my name's Jake," he said, looking back at her. "It's nice to meet you." Lena froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to strangers introducing themselves like this. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words felt stuck in her throat. Finally, she managed to say, "Lena." "Lena," Jake repeated, a smile tugging at his lips. "I'll remember that." And then, just like that, he was gone. Lena stood there for a moment, staring at the door he had just walked through. She wasn't sure what had just happened. It was a small interaction, nothing important, but something about it stayed with her. Maybe it was the fact that Jake had seen her, really seen her, for the first time in a long while. She ordered her coffee, her mind still spinning from the brief exchange. As she sat by the window sipping the warm drink, she couldn't help but wonder about Jake. Why had he taken the time to speak to her, of all people? She wasn't special. She was just another woman in the crowd. But as the day wore on, Lena found herself thinking more and more about their encounter. Jake's kindness had made her feel something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of possibility. For a moment, the weight she carried seemed a little lighter. It was as if for just a few minutes someone had cared enough to make her feel human again. As the sun set over the city, Lena walked back to her apartment, her steps slower than usual. The world still seemed as busy and overwhelming as ever, but now there was a small spark of something new inside her. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was just the smallest flicker of something brighter than the darkness she had been living in. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like there might be something good waiting for her, something more than just the same old routine. Lena couldn't stop thinking about Jake. It had been a week since their brief encounter at the cafe, but his words echoed in her mind almost every day. "Next time you owe me one." The smile he gave her had been warm, like the sun breaking through clouds after a long storm. She'd tried to push it out of her mind. After all, it was just a quick, casual exchange between two strangers. But it had lingered like a soft shadow in the back of her mind. Her life had returned to its usual routine. She woke up early, went to the bookstore, helped customers find the books they wanted, and then went home. Her days blended together, one indistinguishable from the other. The world outside her small apartment felt distant, like she was watching it all from behind a glass window. There was comfort in this, in the quiet routine, but there was also a part of her that felt stuck, like she was running on a treadmill, never getting anywhere. One afternoon, as she was shelving some books, the door to the bookstore opened with a soft jingle, and in walked none other than Jake. He stepped in casually, dressed in his usual suit, but there was something different about him today. He wasn't in a rush. He looked around the shop, his eyes scanning the shelves as if searching for something, and when they finally landed on her, his smile grew. "Hey, Lena," he said, his voice friendly and warm. "I didn't expect to see you here." Lena froze for a moment, her heart beating a little faster. She hadn't expected to see him either. And yet here he was. She wiped her hands on her apron, trying to act as if she was calm, though her mind was racing. "Oh, hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "I work here, remember?" Jake laughed, a soft chuckle that made her feel a little more at ease. "Right, of course. Sorry, I forgot. It's just, I didn't expect to see you today." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" He shrugged, glancing around the shop. "I don't know. You just seemed so out of place last time we met. I didn't expect you to be working in a bookstore." Lena's heart sank a little. The way he said it, it wasn't cruel, but it wasn't a compliment either. She felt a wave of self-consciousness, and before she could stop herself, she blurted out, "I don't belong here, you know." Jake looked at her, his eyes soft with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Lena shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't sure why she had said that. It wasn't like her to open up to someone, especially not someone she barely knew. But there was something about Jake that made her want to say more, to share more than she usually did. "I mean, this whole life I have," she gestured around the bookstore. "It feels like I'm just going through the motions. I don't really feel like I'm living. I'm just existing." Jake watched her quietly for a moment. His expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes that made her feel like he understood. He didn't say anything for a while, and the silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. Finally, he spoke. "I get it," he said simply. "I really do." Lena blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected him to understand. After all, how could anyone truly understand what it was like to feel like you were stuck? Like you were just waiting for something, anything to change. But here he was, telling her he understood. It made her feel a little less alone. "Do you?" she asked quietly. "Do you really understand what it's like to feel like you don't belong anywhere?" Jake nodded, his gaze steady. "Yeah, I do. You see, I've been there too. I've had my share of dark times. I felt like I was lost, like I didn't have a purpose." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected him to say that. She had always assumed that people like Jake, the ones who seemed so confident, so put together, had it all figured out. She never imagined that someone like him would have felt lost, too. "I'm not saying it's the same," Jake continued, "but I know what it's like to feel like you're just going through life without any real direction. Like you're walking through a fog and you can't see what's in front of you. I get that." Lena felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to say something, to thank him for opening up, but the words felt stuck. Instead, she just nodded. She wanted to believe that things could get better, that maybe she could find a way out of the fog that had been surrounding her for so long. but it felt like an impossible task. Jake smiled again, though this time it wasn't as carefree as before. It was softer, more sincere. You don't have to figure everything out all at once, he said. You just have to take it one step at a time. And if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Lena blinked in surprise. You don't even know me. Jake's smile deepened. I don't need to know you to know that everyone deserves someone to talk to. Besides, he added with a wink, I owe you a coffee, remember? Lena's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. The weight that had settled on her shoulders for so long felt a little lighter. For the first time in a while, she didn't feel so invisible. I haven't forgotten, she said softly. Jake glanced around the bookstore again, his eyes scanning the shelves of books. So, what do you recommend? I need something to read. I'm in the mood for a good story. Lena was quiet for a moment. She hadn't realized how much she missed talking about books. She spent so much time working in the shop, shelving books and helping customers, that she had forgotten how much she loved the stories hidden within them. Well, she said, walking over to a shelf. If you like something with a bit of mystery, I'd suggest this one. She picked up an old leather-bound novel and handed it to him. It's about a man who's searching for something he can't even name. It's dark, but it has this strange hope to it. I think you'd like it. Jake took the book, his fingers brushing hers for a brief moment. He didn't pull away this time. Instead, he looked at her and smiled again. Thanks, Lena, I'll read it. Maybe we can talk about it over that coffee soon. Lena nodded, feeling a spark of excitement inside her. Maybe this was what she needed. A small change, a step toward something different. And maybe, just maybe, Jake would be part of that change. As he walked out of the bookstore, Lena stood by the door watching him disappear into the crowd. She wasn't sure where this would go, or if anything would change at all, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like there was a possibility that things could be different. Maybe she didn't have to keep hiding in the shadows anymore. Maybe there was light even in the darkest of places. It had been weeks since Lena and Jake had crossed paths in the bookstore. They had seen each other a few more times after their first meaningful conversation, and each time, Jake seemed to draw Lena out of her shell just a little more. She had even caught herself smiling when she thought about him, something she hadn't done in a long time. But despite their growing friendship, Lena still couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from him, something that weighed heavily on her heart. She often found herself replaying their conversations in her head, wondering if he really saw her for who she was, or if he saw the version of her that she tried so hard to show the world. She had never told him the full story of her life, the parts that made her feel like she wasn't worthy of anyone's attention, the parts that she was ashamed of. Lena had spent years trying to bury her past, the mistakes she'd made, the choices that had led her to the place she was now. Addiction, bad relationships, and moments where she had felt completely lost and out of control. She had tried to erase it all to pretend it never happened, but deep down she knew it was a part of her. And if she ever wanted to truly be free, she knew she would have to face it. One rainy evening after her shift at the bookstore, Lena found herself walking through the streets of the city, her thoughts clouded with doubt. The heavy drizzle felt like the sky was washing away the weight of the day. She had just received a call from her therapist reminding her of an appointment the next morning. It had been weeks since she had last gone, and Lena had been avoiding it. She wasn't sure she was ready to talk about the things that haunted her. Her mind wandered back to Jake. He had been kind to her, supportive in ways that no one had ever been. But what if he knew the truth? What if he found out about her past? She wasn't sure she could bear to let him see the real her, the one that had been broken for so long. As Lena turned the corner, she noticed Jake standing under a small awning, holding an umbrella. He was looking down at something in his hands, but as soon as he saw her, he smiled and waved her over. Lena felt a flutter in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time, nervous excitement. Hey, Lena. Jake called out, his voice cheerful despite the rain. I thought I'd catch you before you went home. Lena smiled shyly, her hands stuffed in the pockets of her jacket. Hey, Jake, what are you doing out here in the rain? Jake shrugged, the smile never leaving his face. I was just walking around. It's a nice evening, even with the rain. Thought I'd grab a coffee before heading home. Lena nodded, glancing down at the ground. She had to admit, the sight of Jake standing there so confidently in the rain made her feel strangely calm. He seemed so at ease, like nothing in the world could shake him. She wished she could be like that. "You're looking a little down," Jake said, his tone softening. "Everything okay?" Lena hesitated. She had been trying so hard to keep it together, to hide the storm brewing inside of her. But there was something about Jake's gentle demeanor that made it feel a little easier to be honest. For once, she didn't want to pretend. She wanted to share the truth. "I've been thinking a lot," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "about everything, about who I am and who I used to be." Jake's expression shifted, but he didn't interrupt. He simply waited, his eyes focused on her, as if he was giving her the space to say whatever was on her mind. "I've never really told you much about myself," Lena continued, her fingers nervously twisting the sleeves of her jacket. "I've always kept that part of me hidden." Jake tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean? You don't have to share anything you're not comfortable with." "I know," Lena said, her voice shaky. "But I think you should know. The real me. Not just the version I've been pretending to be." Lena took a deep breath and began to speak. Her words came slowly at first, like they were buried beneath years of fear and shame. But as she spoke, they started to flow more freely, as if a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying was being lifted. "I've made a lot of mistakes," she confessed. "I've been in some really bad relationships. I've hurt people and I've hurt myself. I've struggled with addiction, and I've tried so hard to forget all of it. I wanted to leave it all behind. But no matter how much I try to bury it, it's still there, and I'm scared that it's all too much, that I'm too broken for anyone to ever really accept me." Jake didn't say anything at first. He simply stood there listening intently, his gaze soft but unwavering. It felt like an eternity before he spoke, but when he did, his voice was calm and understanding. "I'm glad you told me," he said, his words gentle. "But Lena, you're not broken. We all have parts of ourselves that we're not proud of. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do with those mistakes. What matters is that you're here trying to be better." Lena felt her eyes well up with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. She hadn't expected this reaction. She had been preparing herself for rejection, for Jake to turn away from her, to walk out of her life. But instead, he was offering her something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in a long time: hope. "I don't know if I can ever truly forgive myself for everything I've done," Lena whispered, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can ever be the person I want to be." "You don't have to have it all figured out right now," Jake said softly, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Just take it one day at a time. And you don't have to do it alone. You've got me, and I'm not going anywhere." Lena looked up at him, her heart full of gratitude. She had been so afraid to let anyone see the parts of her that she thought were unlovable. But in that moment she realized that maybe, just maybe, she was worth loving even with all her imperfections. She took a shaky breath and smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Thank you, Jake," she said quietly. "You don't know how much that means to me." Jake smiled back at her, his eyes filled with warmth. "I'm here, Lena, and I always will be." As the rain continued to fall, Lena felt a quiet sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone in the world. She wasn't broken. She was simply someone who had made mistakes like everyone else. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days following Lena's conversation with Jake felt like a mix of emotions. She was no longer carrying the heavy weight of hiding her past. She had shared the truth with him, and Jake hadn't walked away. Instead, he had given her something she wasn't sure she could ever fully express: a sense of acceptance. As Lena spent more time with Jake, she began to feel the changes inside of her. She wasn't fully healed, but something had shifted. It was as if the darkness that had once surrounded her was starting to clear, just a little bit at a time. It wasn't easy. There were days when the old doubts crept in, whispering that she wasn't enough, that she'd never truly be free of her past. But those moments were fewer now. She had Jake to thank for that. His kindness had slowly begun to fill the empty spaces she had kept hidden for so long. It had been a few months since their first coffee together, and Jake had become a regular part of her life. They would meet after work, sometimes just for a quick coffee, other times for longer walks around the park, talking about everything and nothing at all. Lena had noticed that every time they met, she felt lighter, like she was becoming someone she had almost forgotten she could be. But despite the warmth of their connection, there was still something inside Lena that was holding back. She had, been through so much already, and though Jake's presence made her feel safe, she wasn't sure if she was ready to take the next step. She didn't know if she could ever be the person Jake deserved. One evening after a particularly long day at work, Lena found herself sitting in her apartment, staring out the window. The rain had started falling again, a soft patter against the glass. Her mind was heavy with thoughts about everything she had been through and everything she still had to face. She knew she had come so far, but there was one part of her past she hadn't yet confronted, the addiction that had nearly destroyed her. It had been years since she had fallen into the grip of drugs, but the memories of those times were still vivid. She remembered the nights when she had felt like she was drowning, when every decision felt like it was leading her deeper into darkness. She remembered the guilt, the shame, the fear of never being able to escape the spiral. And though she had fought to break free from it, the fear that it could all come crashing down still lingered, just beneath the surface. Lena knew that if she wanted to fully heal, she would have to face that part of herself. But how could she? How could she look Jake in the eyes and tell him the full truth? Would he still want to be with her? Would he see her as the broken person she had been? Or the person she was trying to become? The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Jake, standing there on the other side holding a bag of takeout food and a small smile. His presence always had a way of calming her nerves, but today, something inside her felt different. She had been thinking about this moment for days. She knew it was time to be honest with him, to tell him everything. But she wasn't sure if she was strong enough to do it. "Hey," Jake said softly, his smile gentle as he entered the apartment. "I brought dinner. I figured you might need a break from your cooking tonight." Lena smiled, grateful for the small act of kindness. But as she closed the door behind him, she could feel the weight of the conversation that was about to take place. She wasn't sure where to begin, but she knew she had to start somewhere. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to tell you." Jake paused, setting the bag down on the table. He turned to look at her, his expression instantly serious. "What's wrong, Lena? You can tell me anything." Lena took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to say it. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. She couldn't let this part of her past continue to hold her back from the future she wanted to build. "I haven't told you everything," she began, her eyes focused on the floor. "About what happened to me. I told you about some of my past, but there's more. There's something I'm still afraid to share." Jake walked over to her, his hand gently resting on her arm. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share," he said, his voice calm and understanding. But Lena shook her head. She couldn't keep hiding from the truth. Not anymore. "I need you to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I struggled with addiction for years. I lost myself. I did things I'm not proud of. I hurt people and I hurt myself." Jake didn't speak immediately. He just stood there listening, his expression soft and patient. Lena felt a tear slip down her cheek and she quickly wiped it away, feeling vulnerable in a way she hadn't in a long time. "I don't know if I'll ever be fully free from it," she continued, her voice trembling. "The fear, the guilt, it's still there sometimes. And I'm scared, Jake. I'm scared that it will all come back, that I'll slip up again and lose everything." Jake reached out, cupping her face gently in his hands. "Lena," he said softly, "you're not alone in this. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here, no matter what." Lena felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been holding this secret for so long, and for the first time, she didn't feel like it was weighing her down. Jake had always been kind, always been patient with her, but now he was showing her something deeper. Unconditional support. He wasn't judging her. He was accepting her for who she was, flaws and all. "I'm so sorry," Lena whispered, feeling the burden of her past slowly lift. I didn't want to lose you." "You won't lose me," Jake replied, his thumb brushing away a tear from her cheek. "I'm here for you, and I believe in you. I believe in who you are, not who you were." For the first time in what felt like forever, Lena felt like she could breathe. She hadn't expected Jake's reaction to be this warm, this understanding. She had feared that by revealing the darkest part of herself, she would lose him. But instead, he had shown her that love wasn't about perfection, it was about acceptance. The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with an understanding that neither of them had needed to put into words. Lena knew that she wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, she realized that it didn't matter. She was worthy of love not because of her past, but because of the person she was becoming. "Thank you," she said softly, her heart full. "Thank you for not running away." Jake smiled, pulling her into a gentle hug. "I'm not going anywhere, Lena. I'm right here." And for the first time, Lena allowed herself to truly believe that. It had been a year since Lena had first met Jake in that small cafe, and so much had changed since then. Lena had learned to open up, to trust, and to believe in herself again. She had faced her past, confronted the shadows that had haunted her for so long, and found a way to step out of the darkness. And through it all, Jake had been there by her side, offering his unwavering support and understanding. Over the months, Lena had worked hard to rebuild her life. She had gone back to therapy, attended support groups, and made a conscious effort to stay grounded in the present. She had a small but growing group of friends now, people who knew her story and accepted her as she was. She had even started volunteering at a local rehabilitation center, where she helped others who were going through the same struggles she had faced. It felt good to give back, to help others find the strength to make it through their darkest moments, and it was something she could never have imagined doing a year ago. But even with all the progress she had made, there were still days when the weight of her past threatened to pull her under. Some nights the fear crept in, the fear that she wasn't strong enough to keep moving forward, that one wrong step could send her spiraling back into the chaos she had fought so hard to escape. On those days, it was Jake who reminded her of how far she had come. His words, his steady presence gave her the courage to keep going. One Saturday afternoon, after a long week of work, Lena and Jake were sitting in the park, just like they used to. The air was warm, and the sun had finally broken through the clouds. The park was quiet, with only the distant sounds of children laughing and playing. It was the kind of peaceful day that made Lena feel like everything was right in the world. They sat on a bench watching the world go by, not saying much but feeling completely comfortable in each other's company. Lena looked at Jake, a smile tugging at her lips. It was hard to believe that the woman who had walked into that cafe all those months ago, so lost, so unsure of herself, was the same woman sitting here now, at peace with who she was. "You know," Lena said, her voice soft but filled with a sense of certainty, "I never thought I could get here. I never thought I could feel okay again. I thought I was too broken." Jake turned to look at her, his eyes filled with warmth and pride. "I always knew you could get here," he said gently. "You just needed to believe in yourself." Lena took a deep breath, the weight in her chest feeling lighter than it had in years. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You've been so patient with me. I don't think I could have made it this far without your support." Jake smiled, his hand resting on hers. "You've done all the hard work, Lena. You fought for your happiness, and you've earned every bit of it. I'm just glad I could be here with you." For a long moment, Lena just looked at him, feeling a surge of gratitude for everything Jake had done. He hadn't asked for anything in return. He hadn't expected her to be perfect. He had simply been there, steady and constant when she needed him most. And in doing so, he had helped her find the strength to become the person she had always hoped she could be. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves in the trees above them. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun wash over her, feeling the peace she had longed for. A year ago, she never could have imagined feeling this way. So calm, so sure of herself, and so grateful for the life she was building. "You know," Lena said after a long pause, "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what comes next." Jake raised an eyebrow, his gaze curious. "And what do you think comes next?" Lena smiled, her heart swelling with hope. "I don't know exactly, but I'm excited. I want to keep growing, keep helping others. Maybe even go back to school someday. There's a whole world out there, and for the first time in a long time, I feel ready to be a part of it." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "I think that's wonderful. You've got so much to offer, Lena. You've already helped so many people just by being yourself. You've got the power to make a real difference. Lena's smile grew wider. And I want to keep doing that. I don't want to hide anymore. I want to be the person I've always wanted to be, strong, confident, and unafraid to take on whatever comes my way. Jake's eyes softened with pride. I have no doubt you will be. You already are. Lena looked down at their joined hands, feeling a sense of peace settle deep within her. She had come so far. The woman sitting here today was a far cry from the person she had been when she first met Jake. And though there were still moments of doubt, of fear, she knew now that she could face them. She wasn't alone anymore. You know, Lena said, turning to Jake with a thoughtful expression, there's something else I've been thinking about. Jake looked at her, his expression open and curious. What's that? Lena took a deep breath, a small smile playing on her lips. I'm ready. I'm ready to stop holding myself back. I want to take the next step. In everything, in my life, and with you. Jake's eyes lit up with understanding, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. I think I'm ready for that too. In that moment, Lena realized something important. She had spent so much of her life afraid. Afraid of her past, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of not being good enough. But now she was learning to embrace who she was, flaws and all. And that was enough. She wasn't perfect, and she didn't have all the answers. But for the first time, she didn't need to. She was enough just as she was. And with Jake by her side, there was no limit to what she could achieve. As they sat there, hand in hand, watching the world go by, Lena knew that the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt, but she was no longer afraid. She had come a long way, and with each passing day she was growing stronger, more confident and more at peace with who she was. And that was just the beginning.